Started. All right, here we go. We are live here in the Storycraft Cafe. I am your host, Hank Garner, and today I am so excited to have Christina Dodd on the show with me. She's got a brand new book. It's called Forget What You Know. And I tell you what, Christina, I always love when a new book comes out because you do things uh, in a way that no one else is doing out there today. And I just love what you bring to, I started to say to the genre, but they're really, your books kind of straddle so many genres, and I love that so much. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much. I'm always glad to visit with you.
Thank you. So Christina, I've thought of a question that I've been asking some people lately. That's been kind of a lot of fun. In your writing career, and you have written a number of books.
Yes. That's
And
60.
what's the number these days?
About 60. And then short stories and novellas too.
So, wow. Um, Over that time, and especially when you were getting started, a lot of new writers get advice from other people that have been down the road before them. Is there a piece of writing advice that sticks out in your mind? Maybe it was a piece of great advice that you look back and you say, "Oh, I'm so happy that someone told me this," or maybe it's so terrible that you just kind of laughingly look back and go, "Why would anyone, take that advice?" Does anything like that stick out at you?
Well, okay, the good advice is Nora Roberts, and she says, put your butt in the chair and write. And nobody
100%.
does better than Nora Roberts. But the bad one, honestly, some guy came on Twitter one time and said, if you don't write every day, you're not a real writer. And by then I was, 25 years into the career, and it was like, no, that's ridiculous. Absolutely,
Right.
absurd. And the thing that I tell new writers, and I anybody, is as long as you're getting words on the page, that's the right way to write. You you're doing it right. I mean, absolutely. The way I've written has changed over the years, and I have friends who write and we all write very differently, and we're all very successful writers. Um, do what feels good for you, and as long as you get those words out there, then you're okay. And if you can get from the beginning to the end, it really, some writers, really at the beginning concentrate on the first start of the book and can't get any farther. You just have to keep writing.
Well, that advice of, write every day, it sounds like good advice, and and even sounds uh it sounds like, well, that's building good habits, and habits are good to, especially positive habits are good to get into. Um that on the surface, it's like, well, why wouldn't that be good advice? But life doesn't exactly work that way, does it?
No, life doesn't work like that. You have parents who get sick, you have children who get sick. You have to go and spend the whole day at school with your kids. I mean, it real life is not like that. You can't do
Right.
that. And you have to consider it is a job,
Yeah.
and you certainly deserve a weekend.
Yeah.
So
Well,
anyway.
and what I've discovered is that the act of sitting down at the keyboard and typing is not exactly writing. And by what I mean by that is that writing happens even when you're not sitting at the keyboard. So try as you might to take a weekend off. A lot of times the story is still working itself out in your mind.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you'll wake up sometime and go, "Oh, yeah." And of
Yeah.
course, you better get up and write it down because you'll never remember it the more.
Yeah, I have some friends that are like, I never write anything down because if it's a great idea, it'll be there tomorrow. Well, not in my case. I've had brilliant ideas that
Yes.
I just, I can't reach out and grab it again.
My brain, if I don't write it down, it says it's not an important idea, and it just goes right out
Right.
the door. So, obviously, if that's the way your brain works, that's fine, but
Sure, sure.
mine, not so much.
The last time we talked, Christina, you told us about how you broke into writing, and you had a child, if I remember right, and how difficult, I think it started with your first child, and you're like, oh, how difficult can be taking care of a child. I'll write a novel while
Yeah,
and
exactly.
we all know how that turned out.
Just pure stupidity. I mean, honestly, children are a lot of work. I'm breaking the news to everybody here. And so you're not going to probably do a lot of other things other than raise a child. Uh,
Right.
and so many other people are raising children and having another job and trying to write a book. And so you have to salute them. My goodness. So
Right. Looking back now, how many years ago has it been since you've put
I
out
was
60 novels or so? How long did it take you to get to this point?
I've been published for 33 years.
Wow.
30,
Wow.
33 years on February 3rd. But who's counting?
But who's counting?
It
Um,
was not
oh,
3:30.
how many things have changed in publishing and writing? And I separate publishing and writing. The technology of writing has changed a lot. Word processors and writing programs are, you know, just amazing now. When I first started writing short stories, I was mostly writing longhand and
Right.
that sort of thing. Um, but has the publishing industry changed a lot in that amount of time?
The publishing industry has totally changed. And what changed it, of course, was self-publishing. Once people got to the point where they could publish books as ebooks and on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or wherever, that changed the whole complexion of publishing.
Right.
And you've got traditional publishing now and self-publishing, and you get some really great books both ways. So it's been fascinating, and where 20 years ago I could have told you I knew almost everything about publishing. I don't know anything. Don't ask me. Writing, I always had a computer. I always, it was
Yeah.
very early computer. Don't get me wrong, really
Yeah. Yeah.
big and everything. But I've always written on a computer, so that's been the easy way to do it.
Gotcha. When you first broke into writing, what was the genre that you were writing in?
When I started writing, I was reading a lot of romance. I still read a lot of romance. I like
Sure.
romance. Love it. And I read a lot of genre fiction of all kinds. And so I started writing. First, I wrote a historical romance, and I just labored on that for 6 years.
Mm,
I don't even know how many words I had, 200,000, something ridiculous. I mean, it was unbelievable. And if you really want to have a really good laugh, it was a historical romance set in Guatemala. So that one didn't sell. And so then I liked all kinds of writing. And so I
yeah.
next wrote a contemporary romance. That one didn't sell either. And then I wrote another historical romance, and that was my first sold book. But the first two, you have to learn how to write. And
Yeah.
I was a draftsman. I was not a creative writing major or anything like that. And so those are my two learning books. And people say, would you ever publish them? And it's like, oh no, 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 no. Oh.
Well, what's interesting is I'll talk to people that, like you, have a couple of novels that they, as you said, learned to write on, and went through the whole process, learned how to get from beginning to end. Maybe that one didn't do the trick, so you write another one. And then there are other people who write a novel and it's not great, but they go back and revise that novel, and they revise and they revise and they revise until that one does sell. What do you think the difference in those two mindsets are? Work on this until it becomes sellable, versus starting in another vein altogether.
Um, I think you can certainly do that and work on it and work on it. And I did, obviously, 6 years on
Yeah.
the same book. I certainly did.
Well, sure.
Um, at some point you have to say, no, it's time to move on. And I certainly did. And, I've had a lot of really good ideas, and through my career, after I was published, I was rejected many times.
Sure.
I put in an idea to an editor, and they'd say, "No, we don't want that." And once you've got a level of success, you're not supposed to have that happen, but it doesn't work that way. And you say okay, and you move on. You always put the ideas away. You never throw an idea away. And the thing about that is frequently comes back in a different form, or you get a chance with a different editor who likes it, and you get to write what you want.
Is there such a thing as a bad idea that, maybe this idea just doesn't work and it's just never going to work, and you just put that away and try another idea?
Ideas, yeah, I think you could have bad ideas. But that's a matter of opinion too. If you're writing literary, what's a bad idea in genre fiction is probably a good idea in literary.
True.
But you can, I have read books where I thought it was a wonderful idea, a great idea, and they didn't do it well, in my opinion. And I go, I'm going to take this good idea and I'm going to write it my way, and I'll make it good. And I make myself happy with it. And so that's usually a saleable book.
Looking back over your back catalog, it looks like you have mostly written in series, in the past.
Yeah, mostly.
Is there something enticing about writing in a series versus writing standalones? I know some people that have written 50 standalones and they're in no way connected. And each time you start a new book, it's, going back to the drawing board. Is there something exciting about writing in series and taking this idea and stretching it out?
It's of course, as a writer, it's easier if you create a world, which I'm in Gothic right now. It's a town, and we have the same characters, and so it's easier for me. But the main reason I do it, and believe me, I would do it differently if I needed to. Readers like it. Readers like the familiarity of being in the same world. It highlights the story that you're telling rather than the characters. And that's really important, to make the reader comfortable, to make them happy. That's why Regency is so popular. If you look at Bridgerton, people love it. They know the world. They don't have to worry about what the people are dressed like. They know what it is. They know what the manners are. They know what's expected of people. And it makes the reader happier.
Yeah, with like Regency, at Bridgerton, if you see a certain costume, then you kind of understand the kind of the values of the world and the social structure, and there's a lot of things that come with that. That as the writer you don't have to explain. The reader kind of brings that with them.
Yes.
I started writing a series of a bunch of years back. I created a fictional town in the Mississippi Delta, and I wrote a bunch of stories in this town, and they seem to not be connected, but to me they are connected because they all reside in this place,
in the world,
in this world, and in my mind I can tell you all the connections between all of these characters.
right.
And if you read them, you may not pick up on it, but I do. And I get that same feeling from Gothic in your latest series. Is that kind of what you're doing there?
Yes, it's comfortable. I want people to read the story. I don't want them to worry about the window dressing. And at the same time, you also want. I love a good quirky character, and Gothic is loaded with those. And so it's fun for the reader. In Forget What You Know, I created. First of all, a hero is a former pro wrestler, so that was a lot of fun. And then his mother was just the crankiest old woman in the world. The story is about a divorced couple who are being forced back together, and both mothers just did everything they could to screw up that marriage, and they have both realized they've made a terrible mistake. So you see the cranky old woman coming in to make amends. She's still cranky.
Yeah.
But so she's a lot of fun. She's a favorite reader character.
I love it. So when when it's time to start a new book, what is, if we're talking about a series that you've already created the world for, how do you start figuring out what this story is going to be? What are the elements that you pull in that kind of set the stage?
It's all suspense. One of the elements that I love and that readers love is amnesia, and I frequently use it. you can use it as, and forget what you know, that she's taken away, her mother takes her away from her home when she's 4 years old, and her mother says, forget what you know. And of course, at 4 years old, that's really easy to do. So she honestly has no idea what her background is. In the book before that, I simply had someone who was hurt very badly, who had forgotten everything. And you can play with the types of amnesia, but it makes it a very interesting story if someone knows they're in danger and at the same time doesn't know why.
Yeah. Gothic is a fictional town,
Oh,
correct?
yeah. Oh, yeah.
What are you play with a lot of different elements in these books. We've got there's a touch of treasure hunt. There's a touch of psychological suspense. There's a little bit of otherworldliness. You know, that you're expecting something weird to happen, and I don't expect to be able to explain it. You know, there's a bit of those elements.
Right.
Um, what what would you how would you describe if you had to put this in a bookshelf in the bookstore, which I know your books are, but if you were shelving them and not your publisher, where would you say this book lives?
You're either going to go romantic suspense, or you're going to go pure suspense. It is, because I've written romantic suspense, so I do know
Yeah.
the difference. You can have a relationship in suspense, but that's not what the dominant story is. And forget what you know is more dominantly suspense, and very, a lot of characters, and the focus is of course on the heroine and then on the hero, but there's just too much other stuff to be going on to be calling it romantic suspense. So I'd go suspense, but the other worldliness is simply an element that's a lot of fun. The other
Yeah.
thing that makes people not consider me serious suspense is that I have a lot of humor in my books, and people laugh quite a lot. So
Yes, and I was going to bring that up in a minute because this idea of levity, um, it, it you could say that it's can become dismissive for serious suspense readers, whatever that is. But it almost, when you add this element of levity, it almost makes the suspense more suspenseful.
exactly.
Um, because when you give the reader a chance to let their adrenaline come down and feel safe,
Yeah,
because that laughter makes you feel
exactly.
safe, and then you hit them again, it's almost twice as impactful.
Yes, exactly.
Is that on purpose?
Oh, yes. I uh, what Buffy the Vampire Slayer was out, 20 years ago, a long time ago, but they were the ones that taught me that very clever trick, was because it was so amazingly funny. You just roar
Yeah.
with laughter, and then the monsters would come, and it was just twice as bad. And so, yes, I think that really it creates the contrast to make the horrors more horrible, the
Yeah.
suspense suspenseful. And and plus I just think that life is funny, so might
Yeah.
as well.
You might as well laugh.
Yeah.
Tell me about the character of Zoe. Where did she come from?
Oh, she's a complex character. She has a lot of
For
memories that
sure.
I don't understand, but she also has this touch of magic. She is okay. When I started conceiving the story, I had to have a character who could stay in Gothic and make her living there. And so I went onto Facebook, because I frequently do this with my readers, and say, okay, if you work from home, and this was during COVID,
Right.
if you work from home, what do you do? What have you been able to do from your home? And the answers were so fascinating. I mean, I got a list of stuff that people do from home that was just wonderful. But one person said, I'm a flower breeder. I propagate new kinds of flowers. And I was at the time reading a book called Flower Confidential. And I went, bingo. And so that's what the character of Zoe is. She's very connected to the earth. She's very connected to flowers. And she actually has kind of a magical touch with them. And so that adds that element of the unusual to the story, I think, and really a lot of interest.
I love it. Are you a planner? Are you a pantser? Where would you fit
Oh
in that?
no, I definitely I have friends, Susan Elizabeth Phillips, Jane and Krenz. They are they just sit down and start writing, and I'm like, I don't even know how you do it. I would be frozen with fear if I did that. That I would get 80,000 words into it and wouldn't know how to finish it. So I know where I'm going. I don't. I no longer write in a linear manner. That has gone out the door.
Yeah.
I normally write about half of the book now, and then I'm like, I don't know what to do. And so I go and I write the end of the book, which I always know what that is. And
Yeah.
by the time I'm done with the end of the book, with the climax and the wrap up of the characters, I always know what to do between to connect the two. And that's how I'm writing now. Don't ask me in 5 years what I'll be doing. I don't know.
Do you know the end from the beginning, or do you
always know.
discover the end as you're?
I know what the end is. Are you asking me, do I know who the bad guy is? No, that's usually I set up my suspects.
Yeah.
And about halfway through, I kind of know who it is. But and I frequently change my mind. So when people say I knew right away, I'm thinking, well, good for you, because I didn't.
Do you write out your plan, or is this just a system of kind of knowing and holding that in your brain?
I have a lot of no. I don't hold. I told you. I already said that. I don't hold anything in my brain. I write out a plan for the story, and I clear it through my editor too. I always make sure that they are willing to accept that particular story, and then I write a lot of notes. And I continue writing out notes the entire time I'm writing the book.
This idea of submitting a plan to your editor, and kind of working out the story ahead of time before writing, um, that's I'm hearing that more and more from writers, that there's a collaborative effort with their editors
Oh yeah.
beforehand. Is that a new thing, or?
No, 30, no. That, when I started in publishing, and it was only New York publishing at the time, you had they didn't know what I could do. They didn't know whether I was going to be good for more than one book, because frequently people are only got one book in them.
Right.
And so, yeah, I had to turn in my ideas and talk about it with the editors. The editors, it depends on the editor, how invested they are in the story. And, but in the end, it's going to be what I want, and not what they want. I edit very well. Don't get me wrong. If I think it's a good idea and they've come out, they're not editors for nothing. They usually have great ideas.
Yeah.
But in the end, if we're arguing about it, I'm the winner. I'm the author.
Does having a good working relationship with an editor help to keep on a pretty predictable publishing schedule? You hear some writers that, there's 6 years between novels, and most people put out a novel a year, and or something similar to that. Does having that good working relationship ensure that the train stays on the tracks?
Absolutely. It makes sure that you're scheduled to the publishing industry, and yes. But the good thing about that too is if they're not able to schedule you often enough, now you can self-publish something. And I do. I've got short stories and novellas that I put out to fill in the gaps between books, so people have got something to read and they remember me.
Yeah, your books tend to revolve around a mystery of sorts, and like you said earlier, that you have a series of suspects in mind, and you've written them, and then as you write it, you kind of figure out who done it, so to speak. Do all of your books kind of work in that way, that there's a mystery at the core of it that you have to solve as you write it?
Every one of them. Every historical romance, every paranormal romance, every romantic suspense, everything has a mystery. I don't know how to write a book other than that. I have to have some kind of plot. There has to be something going on underneath that the hero and heroine, or the heroine or the hero, has to figure out. And but that for me is how to write a book. And I know people who can actually write books solely on emotion, and I salute them, but I don't know how to do it.
Gotcha. You mentioned the difference in suspense with a romance versus a romantic suspense.
Yeah.
For people that don't understand where some of these genre lines fall, what's the difference in?
Well, okay, these things constantly change all the time.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it. Um, the romantic suspense is basically you have a very intense relationship between a hero or heroine who are probably divided by what's occurred in as the suspense progresses, or they both have different goals. With a suspense with romance, that's you could actually pull the suspense out of the story and you'd still have a really good suspense. But it wouldn't be as interesting. people like a relationship of some kind. You
Yeah.
either have a suspense with a lot of friends, or Deanna Raybourn just did one called Killers of a Certain Age, and it's about a group of female assassins, and that's the relationship is about these longtime friends who are assassins, and it's a suspense. It's a great one, and it's not necessarily male female or male male or female female. It's not romantic. It's just friendship, and that's terribly important too.
Yeah. I tell people all the time that I don't care what genre you're writing in, read a little bit of romance, because there are so many thrillers that I've read that really could use some better relationship storylines. Read a little outside your genre and see
Yeah.
what you could bring into from see what other people are doing really well and try to bring some of that in. It's never hurt anybody.
Before I was published, I worked in a bookstore, and basically you found out what people liked, and we just read widely. We had to. We were recommending books to people, and that's the thing to do. I read every genre, even if you don't like it. Check it out occasionally and see if your tastes have changed, which certainly happens. But
Right.
you'll just learn something. That's important.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a great question from Paula, who says, "What made you realize that your stories all needed a mystery? Do you read or watch mostly mysteries?"
Well, not mysteries, but suspense. And there's a difference there too. Please don't ask me to define that one. But no, it is what I read. It's always what I read. They always have to have that backbone. And I can read women's fiction or fiction that is simply about relationships, but I am not as propelled to read those books. That's not the ones I pick up from. If you read the back copy, it's not what I pick up. I tend to read. I want that bit of suspense in there. And there's just almost every book that you read. Some people are very successful with that relationship book, but most books, I think, have a suspense plot of some kind.
Gotcha. Forget What You Know. Is this the third book in this series?
The first novel is Point Last Seen. The second, I wrote a novella. I went crazy.
Okay.
I have no idea what was. I had an idea for a story, and so I wrote a 20,000 word novella. It is out now as an audiobook exclusive, and it will go into the book eventually.
Gotcha.
And then Forget What You Know.
How do you know when a series has reached its end, or has fulfilled its potential? You've written a number of series that run 6, 8 books long or so,
Yeah.
and then you start a new series. How do you know when that has kind of lived its life?
I could probably keep one series going forever, especially if it is not about the people, but it's about the place. I really love those place series, but sometimes you just move on. The next book the next suspense is finished. I'm calling it Never Go Home Again. Whether or not the publisher will call it Never Go Home Again, I don't know. It'll be out next
That's
month.
a whole different
It is a whole
discussion, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. But it'll be out next March. And this one, Gothic is not the main setting, but it does make a guest appearance. So
Interesting.
it's a nice place to visit, I think.
I love it. I love
It's
it.
kind of like if you like Tolkien, you'd like to visit Middle Earth occasionally.
Yeah. Well, I hope I hope that you stay in Gothic for forever. I love this setting, and I hope that that you stay there as long as possible. The new book is called Forget What You Know. Christina, I know you've got other things to do today, so thank you for joining us. We're going to put links to this book in the show notes to make it easy for folks to find. It's out in hardback and Kindle and audiobook.
Ebook and audiobook and hardcover and trade paperback. And yes, absolutely.
Paperback and hardback at the same time?
Yeah. Well, I sell very well to libraries. And so it's that library market that they are aiming at hardcovers to.
That's awesome.
And then please come to my website, ChristinaDodd.com, and sign up for my newsletter. You'll enjoy it. I actually get fan mail for my newsletters.
I love it. I love it. Christina, thank you so much for taking time to come on and join us today.
Thank you. Great to see you, Hank. I hope to see you again soon.
Absolutely.